In the beginning, I started out with Canon cameras. I bought the Canon M6 Mark II to start off with. Then I decided to get the Canon EOS R. After a while, I wanted to upgrade from the Canon EOS R because it was only an 8-bit camera. It had a crop in 4K, even though the 4K looked great, and the 1080p on the Canon EOS R also had a great quality to it. But the future is 10-bit 422, and the Canon EOS R only had 8-bit 420. So I decided I wanted to upgrade. If I wanted to stay with the Canon system, I had to go to the Canon EOS R6 or the R5. For me, those two cameras just had too many downsides with them, so I started to look into other camera systems, and I ended up going over to Sony. I am filming on my Sony A7S III right now. That was the first Sony camera I got. Then I also decided to get the Sony A7IV because when you do YouTube, you usually need two cameras. Even though those two cameras or the camera bodies are really expensive by themselves, what usually is most expensive when you change camera systems is going from one lens mount over to another, because you have to change your lenses. Of course, you can buy adapters. I have the MC11 adapter that can connect Canon lenses to, or Canon EF lenses to my full frame Sony system, but that's a Sigma adapter, and you only get autofocus in video if you have Sigma lenses. So that didn't work that great for me because I had Tamron and Canon lenses, so I didn't get the autofocus for video. So I had to go over to native Sony mount lenses. Even though I have Tamron lens, I have a Sigma lens, I have Sony lenses, but all of them are for the full frame Sony system. And in today's video, I want to talk about what kind of lenses I decided to get for my Sony full frame system. The first lens I decided to get for my Sony full frame system is the Sigma 24-70 f2.8. This lens is an art lens from Sigma. The art lenses from Sigma is their top-notch lenses, their best quality lenses. And this is a 2.8 lens that gives me a shallow depth of field all the way from 24 up to 70 millimeters. The reason I decided on a 24-70 instead of a 16-35, I believe the G Master lens from Sony is. 16-35 is just too wide for me and what I use my camera and lenses for in most cases, and the first lens I got was a lens that I wanted to use for almost everything. You have the 24mm that is quite wide, so you get good landscape photos if that's what you want. You can take group photos, you can, you have quite a wide focal length with 24, but you can also go all the way up to 70, so you can take good portraits if that's what you want. So overall, this is a very usable lens in most cases. You can use it for weddings, you can use it for almost anything. So that's the reason I decided on a 24-70 f2.8 from Sigma. There is a downside to this lens though, and that is that this lens is quite heavy in my opinion, or it's not the heaviest lens out there, but if this is the only lens that you have and you're going to carry around your camera all day, I go on quite a bit of hiking in the summer, so if I'm going to take my camera and just one lens, this lens is going to be a bit heavy for me. I have been thinking about selling this lens and getting the Tamron 28-75, I believe that is. There is a difference between 24 and 28. It is a little bit more narrow. You don't have that 24 wide angle with the Tamron lens, but if that lens is a little bit lighter than this Sigma lens, I believe I will be selling this lens and getting the Tamron 28-75 f2.8 generation 2 lens, just because of the weight difference. But I'm really happy with this lens. It has given me great videos, it has given me great photos. So if you're looking at the Sigma and you want the Sigma 24-70 f2.8, it is a great lens and I can highly recommend it. It's just that it is a little bit too heavy for me. Last summer I did a lot of macro photography, and I had a macro lens for my Canon system. I had the Tamron EF 90mm macro 2.8, and when I changed camera systems, I didn't want to lose my ability to take macro photos. Nej. I didn't want to lose my ability to take macro photography, so I needed a macro lens for my Sony system also. So I sold my Tamron EF 90mm f2.8 lens, and I got the Sony 90mm f2.8 macro lens instead. This is a G lens. It's not a G master lens, but it is a G lens, so it is quite nice also. It's a really sharp lens. I believe it's one of the sharpest lenses from Sony, and this is, like I said, an f2.8 90mm macro lens. But what's also great about this lens is that it has image stabilization inside of the lens. So when you're doing macro photography, sometimes the things you're taking photo of is really small, so you need to keep your hands and camera still, so the image stabilization inside of the lens really helps. What's also a nice feature about this lens is that you can change from autofocus to manual focus really easy. You have the focus ring on top, and if you want to go from autofocus to manual, you just pull down the focus ring and then you're in manual mode. So you don't have to fiddle around to find the autofocus to manual focus button. So when you have your shot lined up, let's say for a macro photography, and you want to change from autofocus to manual because the autofocus doesn't lock on to the subject that you want to shoot, so you want to have full control of what you're doing, you just pull down the focus ring and you're in manual focus. So that's a really nice feature about this lens. Like I said, it is an f2.8 lens, so even though it is a macro lens, you have the ability to take really nice portraits with this lens also. That's the second lens that I decided to get for my Sony system, because I wanted a dedicated macro lens for my Sony system. Even if I had the 24-70 Sigma lens and I was quite happy with the 24 wide angle range, I found sometimes I didn't get wide enough, especially when I filmed a music video for my job. We made a little dance and whatnot, but anyway, especially in that case, I found that the 24mm was just a little bit too tight. I could have benefited from having a little bit wider lens. So instead of blowing all my money on a G Master 16-35, I decided to get a much more affordable option, which is the Tamron 17-28mm f2.8. This is a really good lens. I haven't used it that much, but because it was quite cheap, especially when you compare it to the G Master, and this lens I actually bought used, so I got it a lot cheaper than if I had bought it new. I found out that, yeah, since I get it used and I got it really cheap, it was worth putting the money in, even if I haven't used this lens that much. Actually, I did use this lens today. I went on a hike with my in-laws and I took some photos. It was quite windy, so I'm not sure how the photos turned out, but if they turned out somewhat okay, I can show them to you here so you get an impression of how good this lens can be. But yeah, it is a 17-28mm, so it is a really good lens for vlogging if that's what you're into. And it is an f2.8, so you get that blurry background all the way from 17 to 28mm. It's not image stabilized inside of the lens, but with the newer camera systems from Sony, you have really good IBIS inside of the cameras. So even though it's not image stabilized in the lens, you get good image stabilization with the cameras. So it's really usable when it comes to vlogging. So this was my third lens that I got for my Sony system. When I decided that I wanted a second Sony camera, I got the Sony A7IV when that got released, and I bought this camera with a kit lens, the 28-70mm, and this is not an f2.8, this is an f3.5 all the way up to 5.6, but this is an image stabilized lens, so I really like this lens, even though it is a variable aperture. It's really lightweight compared to my Sigma lens, and like today when I went on this hiking trip with my in-laws, I could actually just have used this lens. I did use the 17 to 28mm, but the 28-70 would have been just as nice to use. I really had to bring my aperture all the way to 22. When it comes to landscapes photography, you need you can't do landscape photography with an f2.8. You need an f16, f18, f20 to get everything in focus. So there was some mountain tops that I really wanted to get a little bit closer to, and the 17 to 28 just didn't get that far. So the kit lens 28 to 70 f3.5 to 5.6 was my 1, 2, 3, 4th lens that I got for my Sony system, and I got it together with my Sony A7IV. And last but not least, the last lens I have gotten for my Sony system is the Sony FE85mm f1.8. This is a lens that I decided to get just because it was a Black Friday offer, and I got a Sony cashback on this lens also. So when I sold one of my Canon lenses, and the price that I got for that lens covered this lens and more. So I decided, since it was such a great offer, I decided to get this just to be able to do portraits with a little bit shallower depth of field with an f1.8 instead of the f2.8 that I have on all my other lenses except for the kit lens. So yeah, this is a really good portrait lens, and I really like this lens. And from reviews that I've seen on YouTube, I believe this lens is a better lens when it comes to focusing than the f1.4 G Master lens with the same focal length. So cheap, good lens for portrait photography, and I'm really happy that I got it for the price that I did. Now, these are the lenses that I have for my Sony system right now. I believe I am quite happy with the lenses that I have. What I do wish I had was a lens that went from 100 to 400, 100 to 500, something like that, so I could really get up close to like bird photography or anything like that if I want to do that. But right now, don't have the money for it. As you can see, all of this costs quite a lot, even though I sold my Canon camera gear to be able to buy all this. When you change camera systems, you don't get back all the money that you put out when you got that gear. So when you change camera systems, there is a cost to it, and I was well aware of that. So I didn't go a plus in my bank account when I did this change, but I believe I am now with a system that I can use for a lot of years ahead. Both my cameras do 10-bit 422. I have the Sony A7S III that can go all the way up to 120 frames per second in 4K full frame. This has a crop when it comes to 60 frames per second in 4K, and the 120 frames per second with the A7S4, no, with the A7IV is in 1080p, but that's okay. I have my Sony A7S III. For now, I'm really happy with what I got. I know I'm blessed that I can buy all this. So there's a lot of people that can't afford all this, and I should be using the camera gear a lot more than I am right now, but I hope that things will pick up when the spring comes and I get a little bit more time to do so. Anyway, these are the lenses that I have changed over to from when I went from Canon to Sony. What are your thoughts? Do you think any of these lenses could fit your use? If you do want to leave a comment down below, please do so. Just say hi. And yeah, that's it for me for this video. Maybe I will see you in another video.